When I found out that most of the world's medicines come from indigenous people, so 77% of all plant related pharmaceuticals was the standard percentage that was quoted around the time that I started my PhD. I was pretty shocked when I found out about that statistic because, I grew up on Native American reservations and it's not common knowledge. There were two things that I did. I didn't really have any law background when I started my PhD. Um, I First I asked myself, how come I don't know anything about the laws of indigenous people around medicine? If I'm doing my PhD and I don't know a single thing about the laws of the people on whose land I'm standing, it just felt kind of embarrassing. So the first thing I did was starting to ask traditional owners about their laws around their medicines if I'm trying to develop laws to protect them. And the second thing that I started doing was whenever I found a medicine, a pharmaceutical drug that had been basically invented uh, from having been discovered from an Aboriginal community or a Native American community, I would then travel to that community to share what I'd learned. Sometimes they didn't know, and sometimes it had information in there that had been lost. So, you know, it just felt like what you should do, right? If you have that knowledge, you go share it. And nobody was paying me to do that or anything. But I've returned a number of cancer drugs and HIV medicines. Almost all cancer drugs come from indigenous communities, and a number of the HIV medicines. One of them um, is actually, which wasn't indigenous, but has a really interesting story to it and connections to indigenous. Is was about AZT, one of the first HIV medicines. And I went to the States. I live in Australia, and I went just north of Los Angeles to visit him. And it turns out he had passed away, unfortunately. But his son, who was doing some gardening in the front yard at the time, met with me. He was in his 60s, the son, and expressed my condolences when he told me. Um, and first thing is to say thank you for the work that his father did that did save lives. And I was curious if he had any connections with indigenous people, or if his relationships with indigenous people affected his discovery. And he said that I know my father had deep respect for indigenous people. And in fact, it informed his methodology. And at the time, he was working at a university in Olinda, California. And he was working for a pharmaceutical company to to um, improve the targeting of chemotherapy. And but he wanted to develop a cure for cancer. So in his spare time, he this is what his son's telling me. His father meditated on how the human form, when it's in its embryonic development, goes through all the stages of creation, from the mineral to the plant, the different, amphibious, reptile, animal, even bird-like at some point. And it looks like it evolves through all of the stages of creation. And he thought to himself, if the human form has connection to all of nature as it evolved through it, then cancer must have some counterpart in nature. And the reason why he was wanting to find this out was that one of the problems with cancer is that the body doesn't recognize it, so it can just grow, you know, and replicate, and the body just lets it because it doesn't see the cancer as something foreign. And so, if you can find something in nature that reflects the profile of the cancer, and then just get a little bit of it and inject it under the subcutaneous tissue, just in the fat of any part of the body, like a mosquito bite, very shallow injection, and cause an allergic reaction, so to speak. the body's going to see that foreign material, and if it's close enough to the cancer, then the immune system will kick in and take care of the cancer and say, oh, this is not natural to us, it's a foreign entity. So he meditated, and he felt like sea urchin was the closest he could think of. And so he and his son, he said, when I was 15 years old, the son is talking, he said, we went out at night in a little boat, and we went on the coast of California where it's illegal to gather sea urchins. I think that's what he said. I've got it recorded, actually. And we gathered the sea urchin. We took it home to the kitchen. We cut them open and got the sea urchin meat inside. It's a delicacy in different parts of the world, like Aotearoa, New Zealand. And they just made a saline solution where they got just a little bit of it and they mixed it with the saline solution. And then they had 6 or 7 rats in his area, his garage, where he had like a little lab set up. And he injected these rats that already had very advanced cancer and just a little bit under their hindquarters, and came back 1 or 2 days later. I think it might have been actually the very next day. And they looked at the rats, and they opened up one of the rats, and the father was like, his face went white, and he said, look at this. And the son looked, and there is this white blanket squeezing down on the tumor. And he says, you know what we've done? We've just cured cancer. He said, that's the white blood cells. They're all recognize the cancer just from the small injection of something that's not toxic at all for the human body. And then his face went white, and he said, we can't tell anybody. I'm working for a pharmaceutical company. They're going to destroy my career. They might, do something that's bad for the family. I have to take care of you and your mom. And who's going to believe me when they say, what's your research methodology? I meditated because of my understanding of Indigenous principles, and we illegally got sea urchin. I can't share this. He said, you can't tell anyone. And the son told me, this is the first time I'm telling anybody this story. And, so he asked me not to share it. It's actually been a few years. He said, wait, because there's now a team of researchers that his father, before he died, had shared the story with them in the university, and they've developed it into a cancer medicine. So he wanted me to wait a little while. But yeah, so I can get more into that, but just fascinating. And yeah, so there's more to that story, but uh, that's probably enough for a TikTok anyway. But yeah, just fascinating. Thanks. I've got lots more stories like this, so if you're interested, subscribe, like, and feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I will reply. Thank you.